Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi. And today we're here with my special co-host, Lisa, and we're also here with our special guest, a very, very special guest, I might add, Bryan Wetzel. He is the author of 4 books, and one of his books that he's going to be sharing some information from is The Real Problems Destroying Our Education. And we have a lot of issues in the United States and other countries around us, like Canada, who have a lot of issues, but the United States especially, we have a lot of issues that are really hurting our educational system, hurting the children and their opportunity to further their education, and also the teachers. The teachers are the number one people who help our children grow. And they are not being treated the way they should. They are not getting access to the things they need. And I know so many teachers, and they pay for to set up their classrooms. They get a
Mhm.
substantial amount of pay, and then they have to take money out of their own pockets, decorate their classrooms, to do everything. When does it stop? And now with new regulations and laws, our education is kind of going downhill. And Brian is an advocate, and he's here to try to put a stop and bring awareness to the world. And so I'm so happy to have you on the show. And I just want to mention before we begin, Brian is part of our podcast community. He also has a show on our channel. So you can go right to his podcast and you can see all his latest podcasts, and you can learn a lot about the different things in the educational system that are causing problems and destroying our educational system for the future. So Brian, like always, it is a pleasure to have you on the show again. I'm really excited to hear about this topic that you want to bring awareness to our society. Tell everybody a little about yourself and how you got to this point that you are today, where you have such a passion to help people and help our school system.
Sure. Well, I started out most of my career was in media, TV, video, producing, editing, but that evolved at some point into doing educational videos. I started a company called Skubes.com with a couple of business partners, and we were creating educational materials for K through 12 students, and we would go out and sell these packages to school systems. And as I would meet with district administrators and a lot of teachers, thousands of teachers, because I would often go into the classroom and help them learn how to use the product. And in the 5 years that I did that, I was somewhat alarmed by a lot of what I saw going on in the education system. And in full disclosure, my wife is a teacher. She's going on her 22nd year in public education, and so I'm getting a firsthand look at it through her, through my meetings with different state administrators, different schools, and it was very eye-opening. And there were a lot of things that were alarming that I really felt like parents should know about. And you know, we're not going to be able to make changes to the education system until, people get up in arms enough to ask for something to change, for a difference to be made. I kind of relate it to like I don't know any I'm not trying to offend anybody in politics. I really hope our Robert Kennedy gets, confirmed because I really want health to be better in our country, and I want healthier food and healthier medicines. And I think that the only way to fix education is to get somebody either in each state or at the federal level who looks at all the problems and instead of making them politics, actually does something that makes a difference. And there's a lot of things that can be done. At the end of my book, I didn't just write the book so that I could, bitch from beginning to end. I actually, the last chapter, I said, let me offer some ideas that teachers have given me that would make immediate difference in the education landscape. And so there are things that would be easy enough to fix, but the biggest problem with fixing those problems is that the people at the top would have to admit that there's a problem, and then they would have to be willing to make those changes. And unfortunately, whether it's pride or it's their income or whatever it is, that is a difficult challenge trying to get the people at the top in most states or counties or districts to make better changes. And a lot of them are just protecting their spot, you know, in the education landscape as far as where their career is. And a lot of teachers often tell me that they call it the climbers, the people who climb to the district level, and they don't want to leave
Yeah.
because you make better money, you don't have to be in a classroom all day. And so it's very disheartening a lot of times. And if you follow the news now, you constantly see fighting over education, what to do about it. The union has one, some ideas. Then, there's people with homeschool. I will say this too, for homeschooling has been growing in popularity for about the past 15 years, a little more. And I've heard people complain about this, but if you fix the education system, there won't be so many parents thinking that they have to take charge of this. A
Hmm.
lot of the parents that I interviewed who were homeschooling, that's a lot of time out of their day. They don't want to have to do that, but they don't feel like they have another option.
Right.
And you know how you fix that? Then you make it better. You make it better. That's just
Yeah.
all I tell. And every time I get pushback from somebody at a district, um, or a union, I just tell them, I said, look, if you don't want that to happen, then do better.
Yes.
Just do better. That's all anybody is asking. I don't think anybody is expecting education to be perfect,
Hmm.
but we can do a lot better than we're doing. Some of the statistics that just came out this week, I think there are 42 schools in the city of Chicago. They don't have high schools that don't have, they have zero students at grade level in math that are graduating. That can't be.
Right.
That's a failure any way you look at it.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying they should all be math scholars, but can't we at least meet the grade level standards? Um, Baltimore, similar. I think they had only 6% of their students in the city at level with English and math and writing.
Hmm.
That's not good. And these are the people we're expecting to run the country at some point.
Yeah.
How are they going to get into a college if they can't even, write at a high school level? So these are the things that concern me, and this is really why I wrote the book and to discuss that. I will say this: if I had to give it a headline, I would say that education right now, all over the country, everybody's just putting band-aids on a bigger problem,
Yes.
and they're not fixing the damage. They're just putting a band-aid over it, hoping that it goes away. And it's really, really, like I said, I've said it multiple times. It's very disheartening.
Yes.
Um, I'm not somebody who has a doctorate degree, but I do believe that, people should be educated. That's the best way. Even if you're going to get out of high school and get a a blue collar job where you have a skill, you should at least be able to do the basics if you're
Oh,
going to be
yeah.
successful. Um, and I don't think it's too much to ask that these schools are graduating kids who are at least proficient at the grade level of high school. And, you know, I've often debated people on this. There's no pushback on that. They just give me excuses why it can't be done right now. And I just don't buy that. And that's why I wrote the book in a nutshell.
Well, I'm glad you did. Most of the people right now, like when they did a survey in the United States alone, most people are on a sixth grade level. We dropped from being on an eighth grade level to a sixth grade
Mhm.
level. And also, another thing that they found was that when the school systems were ranking very low, the test scores were very low, what they were doing is put in special programs, and they would put in special programs that they knew that would bring kids with higher IQs over to that school
Mhm.
system, and they would have the program there. So then all these kids with higher IQs were going to participate, let's say, in the law program. And that school
Right.
had a very low IQ, like a lot of the kids were not meeting grade level that they were supposed to. So then they had
Mhm.
the smart kids that had a higher IQ that were going to participate in this law program. They were coming in. So when they took the tests at the end of the year and they took they're automatically the overall score for the kids.
So they artificially inflated. the
Yes,
scores. Yeah.
exactly. And that was done
Wow.
in lots of places all over the state.
Well, in a lot of districts, there it's in California, Oregon, Washington State, probably I think there's five others, New Mexico. I can't remember them all, but you can't fail.
Hmm.
They don't give a grade below a D, even if you don't turn in the work or you don't answer one question on a test, you still get a D.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And they have, and I look, I love it that people don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but you have certain states where they say we don't want to give kids bad grade because it might hurt their self-esteem. But to me, telling them, look, you can do better, this is not good enough, is
Yeah,
a better way to go. That's how it was when I was growing up, and
right.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to skate on not doing my work. And but I'll tell you a story, and I have to keep all these stories very generic because I don't want to out anybody. But I know a teacher who received a kid in Georgia who's elementary school age. She came from California. Well, she came here to go to third grade. She can't read or write at third grade or do math at third grade level. But so they wanted to move her back down to second, but they're prevented from doing that because her file from California says she did amazing, that she was knocking it out of the park. That's not helping that child in the long run. That's another example of a band-aid. I didn't want to hurt their feelings, so I told them they did fine. Um, and that goes on too much. There's also some states where they have decided that they're not even going to grade math. You just do the math, and whether you get it right or wrong, you get a completion.
Right.
I don't think that's very good.
Jeez.
And particularly with math, look, I hated math. And I'll tell you a story. My dad
Me
was a
too.
CPA. My dad was a CPA, and oh my God, the fights we would get into helping with my math homework because he knew it and understood it, and it was easy to him. And so when he would teach me, he would skip steps that I didn't understand. So
Yeah.
we would battle constantly. And I, but being able to do basic math, I have an argument in my book that maybe once you get to high school, you don't need to do trigonometry. You don't need to go that unless you want to continue on.
Mhm.
But
Hmm.
let's face it, adding, subtracting, and multiplication and division, you do use those in your everyday life. I know there's calculators and stuff, but you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
And to not grade it and let them know whether they got the right answer just doesn't seem productive to me.
Right.
And I don't really understand where the common sense of that comes in. And nobody's been able to tell me. I actually reached out for the book for an interview with several districts in Oregon and Washington, and they wouldn't talk to me. But well, they started to, but they didn't want to. They didn't want to
Yeah.
answer why they don't grade. They referred me to some white papers that were written by the University of Oregon, and I read them, and I still don't understand, to be honest.
It sounds like they're not being set up for success, right?
It doesn't. It sounds like they're getting set up to move them on.
Yeah, they're just moving them through the system, right? As
Hmm.
quickly as they
Yeah.
can. And that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why you end up with kids graduating who are not at grade level. If you're already behind in third grade or fourth grade, and nobody is going to stop you and say, "Wait a minute, wait, we have some work to do before you
Yeah.
move on." You're never going to catch up. And math is a great example of that because math builds upon itself.
Hmm.
You can't do algebra if you didn't know how to learn your multiplication and division.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't think that they're doing them I think they're doing a disservice, quite frankly, and here's the thing, you don't have to, someone told me once, they said, well, giving a child a bad grade while they're in school in front of all their friends and everything is demoralizing. And I said, you don't have to do it in a demoralizing way.
Exactly.
You can just say, look, this is not passing, but we can do better. Most schools have after school programs that are free tutoring, and some have them before school. there are options. You don't have to hire a tutor or have a lot of money. Um, but we shouldn't just pass them along. And what frustrates me the most is that if you look at statistics, because when we're talking about Baltimore city schools and Chicago city schools, these are inner city schools where the kids are growing up in poverty.
Yeah,
How are they going to get out of poverty if they can't do the basic stuff to help them get a better job?
that
And
was
so we're
one thing.
not helping them. We're not helping them move up the income level if they can't do the basic work. And
Yeah,
so I think that we're just relegating them to be in poverty for the rest of their life.
I agree 100%. And if you look also, they've taken out so many programs over the course of the last 5 to 6 years. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. There used to be in the school system so many programs. They had speech, for children who were having trouble with pronunciation and certain problems that were related to
Hmm.
speech, or any type of speech disorder. Then they had the in-between classes, children who their development
Hmm.
skills were slower, and they had like the in between the first and second, they had like 1.5 program, and they did that in a lot of
Hmm.
school systems. And then they had
Yeah.
the teachers who were assistants who came in and made sure they were specific children who were struggling, that they knew exactly who those kids were. And they always went over to kind of
Hmm.
help them and guide them along and not make them feel, like they were any different, but they were there to so they could keep up with the other children. A lot of
Yes.
things have been taken out in many parts of the country, and it makes it
Yes.
a lot harder for a teacher to teach children, because it's not in New York City. When I grew up, it was the 1, 2, 3 class, and that they used to really abuse the kids in the 3 class, and that really hurt their self-esteem, and
Yeah.
but now they mix the children up, and they do it in a way where they're not put out there, and
Yeah.
they did have some classes where they had smaller classes, more contained classes for children who really struggled, but
Yeah.
they
So
don't.
they were interventions
There were
essentially.
many
Right.
interventions, and a lot of those things have now been taken out because
Right.
they have a budget, they don't have enough of money, this and that. But
Yeah.
if you can't give the teachers the necessity to help, so we can help these children, how are we going to help these children elevate to a higher level so they can learn how to get further apart? Because like if they're struggling through the kindergarten, and till end of elementary, if you really work with those kids even in middle school, by the time they get to high school, a lot of those problems they will be caught up, and it will help them,
Yeah, they will.
you
They
know.
will. I'll tell you something that a professor told me at Kennesaw State here in Georgia, who disagrees with how they're doing things. But one of the things she said to me that really stood out, and I was like, oh, that's a good point, is that elementary is the perfect time to do that
Oh yeah.
because their brains are they're pliable. And by the
Totally.
way, when you say to them, you're not, this is not right, these answers, we're going to work with you. We want to get them right. You are teaching them at an early age that they can master it if they just put their mind to it,
Yeah.
spend a little extra time, if they focus on it, or they also learn that I can ask for help and
Right.
get there. But when you just pass them along, they're not learning any skills that will help them later on in school.
Yes.
They're learning that I need to, hopefully this teacher will just let me go. And that's not a, that just goes back to the earlier complaint that we're raising them to be uneducated. Um, and I'll say this, we were talking about programs. One of the programs, like in California, they got rid of the gifted program.
Mm-hmm.
Now, their reasoning was because, again, it hurt kids who don't make it, it hurts their feelings. But here's the problem. You now flip the problem on its head. So now you have kids who are very smart and they're bored in class because they're
Yeah.
now sitting in a class with students who are not moving as fast, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're the ones getting hurt. And
100%.
I don't under I think that, look, everybody, as we just discussed, I hated math and I don't have a math brain. um, all of the teachers that I hired to do videos, they all had a math brain. They could literally look at a problem and go, oh, that's the, and that's impressive to me. I can't do that. But and then I know I talk about in the book, I can't remember this guy's name. There's a professor, I'll find it later, who wrote a book about different intelligences. And I really think that that is a thing. So how many do you know people who I do who picked up the piano or the guitar, never
Hmm.
had any lessons?
Yeah.
They have a musical brain,
Hmm.
Totally.
or a math brain, or there's athletes who have, think quick enough and develop that's their strength.
Yeah.
Kids who are in gifted, that's their strength, and we should be supporting that as much as we're supporting the kids that need more help.
Right.
We shouldn't be holding them back so that I think the idea is that the kids who are not gifted will catch up, but that's not practical,
No, it's
in
not.
my opinion.
But think
You
about
also have to understand that not every kid puts in the same amount of effort.
100%.
Everyone's so individual on such a deep, deep level,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Right. You see this even in adults,
Yeah. You see that
you
in
know?
adults, and you see when if you don't challenge these kids, once they will get bored, and two, when they get into the big world, when life is no more, they're not like patting them on the back anymore, and life becomes
Mhm.
real. They say that most of the young kids today are so stressed, and a lot of them are on Xanax because they can't handle the stress.
Mhm.
And why is
Yeah,
that? Because we didn't challenge them enough. We didn't set them up for
right.
real life. You can't worry
Yeah,
about their self-esteem. The whole point of life is that we're all going to get knocked down at some point, but we have to learn how to get
yes.
back up. And that's how
Dealing
you
with
get
that
through
is
life.
a muscle that you develop, dealing
Yes.
with tough times. So I used to own a restaurant. I tell the story in the book. I used to own a restaurant. I was astounded. I did not know, but a lot of my servers and food runners and hostesses were high school girls. I think two-thirds of them were on SSRIs and anxiety medicine.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with this one girl. I loved her to death. There's a longer story about her in the book that's kind of disheartening. But I said one day, I said, well, why do you think you need all that? She said, you don't know what it's like growing up having to deal with grades and dating and your parents and learning to drive. And I said, and a job. And I said, I did all those things.
Hmm.
And I didn't need to have any medication to do it. I was just expected to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that by telling people that you can't do it, I just don't agree with that. I just don't. And maybe I'm just old school, but I think that that you're not teaching them to deal with life struggles. And guess what? Well, if you think life is tough in high school,
Yeah.
wait till you get out and have a mortgage and kids. And,
Yeah.
you know, I tell people all the time, having kids means that at any time of the day, you could get a call
Yeah.
that flips your day on its head.
Well, even when kids went into college, they were shocked because when you go into college and you have a college professor walk in and they just, they tell you, the lecture, they tell you what is
Uh-huh.
expected, and then they walk
Hmm.
out. And
Yeah,
then
they walk
you're
out.
on your
Yes.
own. You have to, they gave you the agenda, they gave you what they expect from you.
Mhm.
They gave you the dates where they expect it, and
Yeah,
boom, boom, that was it. And the rest you had to figure out on your own. And how are we supposed to, prepare our children in the younger grades for that if we don't give them the ability to get challenged and to learn how to do it? You
yeah,
have to, if you don't succeed, you have to learn that it's not, that doesn't mean you failed. It means that you didn't reach your expected goal, but you've
right.
learned something from that. And when you use what you learn, you got to try again and try again. And eventually you will find what you're looking for, and you'll get to that level that you want to. And then if you
Yeah,
don't, you have to, don't be so hard on yourself. These kids have to learn because nobody is perfect. We can do what we
right.
do, but you can't just say, oh, the poor child, no, we don't want them to, we can't give them an F because it's going to hurt their feelings. Well, maybe they'll learn from that F and they'll realize, well, maybe I should start doing my homework assignments, because then mom and dad are going to really realize that I'm playing video games all day and I'm not doing my homework.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes, that's very true. Um, and you'd be shocked at how, when I talk to teachers, at how many of them will tell me the parents don't even know what their child's grade is. They
Yeah.
don't
Oh,
look.
Wow.
well, yeah.
Ever since it went on the app, of course, my
Hmm.
wife's a teacher, so this is biased, but there's that every time one of them walks in the door, why did you get a C in this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
it
no
would come in the
grade. There's no
mail.
grade for the
No more.
yeah,
Yeah.
no
No
more. It's
more.
right on the
No
app.
more.
I
It's
knew
on the
like
app.
my parents had to sign my like if I didn't do well on a test, they
Oh
had to
yeah, me
sign
too.
for it. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
that's
learned real well how to do my mom's signature a couple
Yeah.
times.
Yes. I think I tried that once and got
And it
busted.
was math. Shocking math.
my
Oh
youngest
yeah.
daughter jokes around that she had my name perfected. She actually took it and she had a stencil that she used to use when she got a bad grade, but she didn't let me know until after she was in college, and then she's
Yeah.
laughed about it. But you don't
Uh,
know, because these a lot of parents know where Instagram is, they know where TikTok is, but they have no clue how to sign in and look at their kids' grades. It's time to,
that's true.
you know,
And by the way,
Wow.
when it comes to that, you need to be looking at what your kids are putting on Instagram and
yes.
stuff.
Hmm.
Oh,
We have
that's a whole
seen
new episode. We need to have
that
you
Yeah.
come back.
that we would have to do a whole other one, but we have experience with this where, one of the kids will say, "Look at what such and such posted," and you look at it and you go, "She's 13. Does her parents not pay attention to what she puts up? That's
Exactly.
inappropriate."
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could get off on that. That would be
We'll
another
say that for
tangent
the next show.
entirely. We'll do
Yeah,
that one, yeah.
exactly.
But you had
So
mentioned, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you mentioned about vouchers and choice, and you
yes,
told me that there's
so
a big
that's big
importance of
in this
that.
that's in the news a lot right now. And there's a lot of very angry battles going on back and forth between people who approach choice for schools and vouchers and people who are most of the people who are not in favor of choice is going to be your union and whatnot. And what they will say, and I see this constantly posted, is that it takes away money from the public school.
Mm,
And that's a fuzzy math thing because here's what happens. All schools get paid federal money, or they get money from the federal government based on what's called average daily attendance. So if your population drops or if your attendance drops, let's say by 10%, well, you get less money.
yeah,
But and what they'll say is that, well, people who choice their kids to another school, that's taking money away from that local public school. Or if it's a voucher, they take their kid to another place, that's taking away money from the public school. That's technically true. But here's the thing about that. First of all, the school has less kids to take care of.
yes.
Their expenses should come down because they have less kids.
Hmm.
And it whether you think it's right or wrong, it's also right or wrong. It's also right to tell parents who pay taxes, and in your taxes, you pay education tax.
Hmm.
So if the local school is not doing well, let's say it's one of the schools where kids are graduating at not a grade level, and
Yeah,
you're a concerned parent, who wants to tell them that you must leave your child in that school?
right.
I've actually spoken to parents rather, that had situations where their children were being violently bullied
Hmm.
and they didn't want to go to school
Yep.
and they wanted to move and they were in a state where they weren't allowed. So
Hmm.
they just took their kids out of school. That's not a good way to handle it either.
Yes,
Um, and
I've seen
so to
that.
me, a voucher or being able to choice your child to another school makes sense. Now, there is some long-term data out of Stanford University. It's in the book, and I can't remember the professor's name because it's been a while since I've read my own book. But the long-term studies show that a lot of the public schools actually got better because of this. Now,
Mhm.
whether that was, it's still to be determined whether that was because competition, they had no choice but to get better,
Hmm.
or if it's because a lot of public schools are overcrowded.
Yes.
And so now, by having that population drop a little bit, a teacher who had 24 kids in their class, who only has 17, can
Yeah.
now spend more time with those kids. Um, and so I think that we can split hairs on what's right and what's wrong, but I always go back to this argument that if my child was going to a school, districted to a school that was failing them, and I didn't feel like they were going to be able to get out of school and get a good job or to go to college,
Yeah.
who am I to tell them, no, you can't move your child?
Right.
And I believe in that the freedom to take we all as parents, we want to look after our kids and we want the best for them. So I just always default back to that the parents should have the choice.
They just
And
should
if you
have.
look on YouTube, there's some really sad videos where, um, so a lot of charter schools are overfilled in this country. There's not enough of them.
Hmm.
And they have lotteries now. Now, if your child's already in school in the charter, you don't lottery every year.
Yeah.
But if you're just putting them in, you have to go into a lottery where they draw names. And there's literally
Crazy.
videos on YouTube where when parents are praying and then crying, waiting and hoping that their child gets picked because they want them out of the local school.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's a scene that should make some of the public schools and the unions, that should make them cringe.
Yes.
Do better. That's all I always tell them. Just do better. People won't move their kids if private school is expensive, even with a voucher. Most
Oh yeah.
vouchers only cover
Mhm.
about a third to two-thirds, depending on the how nice a private school you go to.
Yeah.
And there's no buses, so you have to get them there.
Oh yeah.
Parents would much rather let their kids go to the local district school.
Right.
Okay, so don't if you make it good enough, they'll stay there.
Yeah.
They will. You won't have to worry about them taking their child somewhere else. And I would say this too. Um, Thomas Sowell, who I'm a big fan of, he has a book about charter schools. And one of the things he points out in there that blew me away, because even I didn't know this. Several of the charter schools in New York City are housed in the same building as the public school. So the front of the building is the public school, and the back of the building is the charter school. So they're pulling from the same neighborhoods. And yet the charter schools are scoring about 35% higher than the public schools. So that really reflects that it's about the curriculum that you're choosing.
Yep.
It's about how you're there. In charter schools, they have a mandate that the parents sign that you're going to make sure your kid does his homework, does all of what is necessary to do well in school, or you can be taken out. And so having that, and probably a lot of other things and policy changes. And I can go over one of them that Stanford University pinpointed. But the fact that they're pulling from the same neighborhood and they're doing better, that doesn't really hold water for the public schools when they say, well, it's because of this, it's because of that.
Yeah.
A lot of times, public school advocates, particularly the union, will say, well, private schools do better because they can get rid of problem children, behavior children. And I was in a debate on TV like a year and a half ago, and I just simply said, look, if that's all it takes to make my local public school better, well, then let's discuss some options.
Right.
Maybe the children who are disrupting class shouldn't stay there. Maybe in my day, you had alternative school. Maybe that needs to be brought back so
Hmm.
that the kids who do want to learn aren't interrupted by bad behavior. And I know one teacher sent me a story. It was long about a child in elementary school who was using the F bomb at her, has thrown things at her, has been suspended 5 times. They won't kick the child out because the parents have threatened to sue. And so she is forced to keep this kid who disrupts class every single day in that classroom. It's gotten so bad that two of the parents of other kids in the third grade class are now suing the school. They were trying to avoid the parents of the problem child suing the school, but
Yes.
now parents are suing the school because they say, look, my child's not getting an education
Right.
because one person is disrupting. There's got to be a balance to that. I don't want to kick kids out of school just on a whim, but there has to be some guidelines. What seems to happen across the school, and I actually had a district, no, I had a principal who retired, and when I was interviewing him, one of the things he said was that in his day, they would have been removed.
Yeah.
He said, but now the policy is that if we can just get them out, because if they're in third grade, he's only got 2 more years, and then he'll be a middle school problem. And in middle school, he'll be a high school problem if we can just get him through the 3 years. Um, that's not really a policy.
No, it's not.
That's an appeasement policy. So let me go back to one thing. So one of the things that Stanford pointed out. So when I interviewed teachers, I asked them, I talked about this on the last episode, what are the reasons why you left education? And if you ask the average person, they would say pay. Pay was third. Number one was behavior.
Hmm.
Number two was they want to be left alone to teach.
Yes.
They're not being left alone to teach anymore. They're putting pressure on them to do things that are outside the scope of teaching.
Yes.
And they're also telling them how to teach. So I tell a story in the book about a teacher that I know. She was one of our teachers in Skubes. She's an excellent teacher. She won Teacher of the Year for the whole county where she teaches. She had a class of kids who came in underperforming, and by the end of that school year, they were overperforming.
Yep.
The following year, in that week when the teachers come back to school, before the students come back, and it's all full of meetings for the teachers. They had all the teachers gathered, and they had her stand up, and everybody gave applause for the wonderful test score she got. And then 5 minutes later, they said, "But you're not going to teach the way you taught last year. We have a new program we want to do and a new method." This makes no sense
No.
in a corporate environment. And I've seen this. If let's say you had a sales teams, if one sales team was just knocking it out of the park and just like their numbers were better than others, they
Yeah.
would have them come and tell everybody else, what did
What they
you
were doing.
do to get
Exactly.
that? We want to know how success was found by your team so that everyone else can map it out. In education, they constantly change how it's taught. They tell them what they're going to teach and how they're not going to teach. And by the way, they always come back to the same stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Teachers, this is one of the most frustrating things for them. And there's in the book I go in because there's so many things that expand from this. So let's say in most districts, let's say they change the math program. Well, the literature, the state test, county test, all are about a year and a half behind.
Hmm.
So a teacher's teaching to the new program, but the test shows up and it has last year's questions. And so they're being held to answer for why their test scores aren't good. And this,
Right.
I understand why they're frustrated. This doesn't make any sense. If you're
Hmm.
going to change the program, at least change everything at once or
Yes.
plan ahead. Say 2 years from now, we're going to do this. Um, but that's not what happens.
Hmm.
And so they get very frustrated with this. So one of the things that this lady from Stanford who studied this for I think 14 years, one of the things she pinpointed for private schools and charter schools that made their scores better, it wasn't that the teachers were better. It was that the teachers had autonomy to
Hmm.
teach the way they know how to teach.
Mhm.
Right.
And I'll give you a good example. My wife one time told me, she said, I know the kids in class who like to work in groups. I know the kid that likes to work by himself.
Hmm.
I know the kid that I can get on his butt when he's doing something wrong and he will shape up. I know which kids, if I get onto them in front of class, they will shut down. I tailor the way I deal with the kids and teach them
Yeah.
because they all have different personalities.
Mhm.
But being told that you can't do that, that just doesn't make sense to me.
No.
Um, and I think it's been proven by the Stanford study, and Harvard is doing one now on the same thing. And they came up with autonomy is the best way to let teachers teach
Yes.
because teachers know what work.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
have a teacher who's been in the class, when we pick teachers for Scoops videos, I wanted them to be in the classroom for more than 10 years.
Hmm.
And here's why. Because a teacher who has taught a lesson more than 3 or 4 years, they have that lesson refined in their head. They know what questions they're going to get. And so they've incorporated them into their lesson.
Yep.
They know what the students are going to struggle with, where they're going to get mixed up. And so if you're a new teacher, though, you may not know those things. So you're learning as you go.
Right.
So a teacher who's been in the classroom for a while, should be allowed to teach what's best. Tell me what you want them to know at the end of the year.
Right.
I will get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
got to
Definitely.
they're the
cut me off
expert.
or I'll keep going.
Yeah, no, you made a great point. They're the expert because they've seen the behavior, they've learned from it, and now they can set that example for the next group of students that are coming in because they know it, they can
Yes.
predict it. And
Yes,
so why
Yes.
not set the teacher up for success in the same way, right?
exactly.
Yes.
You
Very
don't
much.
need to
That's a
start over again. It doesn't make any sense.
yes. They start over a lot. Because there's a funny story about this is that when we started Skubes, Common Core was going to be put into practice the following year in America. And I went around to all the teachers and I said, hey, we're doing this and we're setting it up for next year for Common Core. And every single teacher looked at me and said, well, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. It'll be gone in 3 years. And they were right. To the year, it was gone in 3 years because they put stuff in and it doesn't work or people don't like it. And then they just change it again. And then they'll change it again 3 years from now. And one of the bigger problems with that too, because earlier I said there's so many problems that outstretch from changing the curriculum. One of the other problems is that a lot of times what happens, let's use math as an example. So one curriculum may have you teaching dividing fractions in sixth grade,
Mm-hmm.
but the next one might have you teaching it in fifth grade.
Right.
But let's say you're at fifth grade and you didn't learn to divide fractions, you move up to sixth grade, but that lesson moved back to fifth grade. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now you're not getting that lesson. And so you have a gap in your math knowledge that the
Mm-hmm.
sixth grade teacher or the seventh grade teacher, eighth grade teacher has to try and fill in for.
Right.
And that goes on a lot more often than people realize.
Yes. When I was participating in the school systems, what I've noticed too is that the principals and the superintendent really don't understand what's going on in the classroom. They visit the classrooms for a few seconds and they pop their head in, but they
Yeah.
do their little auditorium thing, but they really don't understand the children. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand the teachers' needs or the children's needs and what's really important. A lot of them, and also the problems too, is a lot of these teachers they're not taking time to teach these teachers what to do in certain scenarios. So things pop up that are unexpected. If a child has a medical condition, if a child autism is on the rise, if a child comes in the classroom,
Mhm.
they're autistic. How does that teacher deal with an autistic child in their classroom? No one teaches
Right.
them that. If a child comes in and a child has epilepsy, no one teaches them what happens if the child has a seizure. And if a child is disruptive, one of the main reasons why children are disruptive is because they're having problems at home, and
Yeah.
Hmm.
it stems from there. So instead of making that child, bringing them to the principal's office and punishing them and making them ousted, maybe we should go and figure out what's going on and have a group or an organization that goes to the parents and checks out what's going on and then figures out ways of, solving the problem because maybe they are in
Yeah.
homes that they shouldn't even be in. Maybe there's a mental abuse, maybe there's physical abuse, maybe
Yeah.
there,
That goes on a lot.
and so
Hmm.
things have to be, they have to have these programs intact so they could help these children. And, because once they're out of the situation, out of the environment, I'm sure their behaviors will get better, if they have the proper
Yeah.
guidance, So there's a lot of things
Well,
that need to be
and you
done.
see that in the elementary too, in a different way, because they're young. I have seen personally, and I've also heard stories where elementary school kids who are in very poor neighborhoods, they don't want to go home
Yeah.
because at the elementary school level, the teacher cares for them, gives them attention. They have food,
Mm-hmm.
the utilities are on.
Yeah.
Um, it's not dangerous.
Yeah.
And it seems safe and secure compared to their home life. And that's
Yeah.
sad when a child doesn't want to go home.
Very sad.
Um, but that also, you know, so this is a longer, we could have a whole hour on this, but I'll just touch on it briefly. So a lot of times when a student is not doing well, people think that a teacher should always be able to overcome. But one of the things that my wife would tell you, two or three dozen teachers have told me, is that how is a teacher going to overcome what a child goes home to?
Yeah.
Okay, the child goes home to a parent who's getting arrested or already in jail, Maybe there's nobody home at all. They don't know who's feeding them. Nobody's cleaning their clothes. That's not that uncommon, by the way.
No, it's not.
Their home life is terrible. It's violent. Doing their homework is not the most important thing to them.
Mm-hmm.
And school is not the most important thing to them when they go home. It's surviving or
Exactly.
getting by. And so, um, I brought this up in the book because there was a governor in Georgia, and I know his heart was in the right place, but he wanted the state to take over failing schools. And I argued on the radio, and I voted for him, but I argued on the radio that this makes no sense. What is he going to do? Because you can't fix it at the school level. You need to fix the community. You
Yes.
need to fix those communities, and you're fighting an uphill battle. You can put new paint on the school. You can bring in 10 new teachers.
Mm-hmm.
You can do whatever at the school level you want, but if you can't fix their home life, you just can't overcome that. You just can't.
No, you can't. Now tell me a little about your book.
The one we're talking about was for
Yes.
education.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, I chronicle every little thing that I saw was a problem, and I take everybody to task, including parents. I take the teachers to task, administrators, unions. I take because everybody has a part in this, and everybody could do better,
Right.
including the parents. And oftentimes the parents don't realize it, but they're creating bigger problems by just making demands that are not doable.
Yes.
Um, and I understand that we look out for our kids above everyone else, but if you have to, there has to be some common sense involved in that. Um, we're not going to get into bigger details of that, but we all understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The book really is just a chronicling of every little thing. So, for instance, when I do the chapter on students, I have a section in there on behavior. When I do the parent section, I have a spot in there about behavior because the parents are related to the behavior of the students.
Oh, 100%.
And when I get to the administrators, I have a section on behavior
Mm-hmm.
because how they handle it is also a problem.
Yes.
And and so I want everybody to see how all this stuff is interrelated,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's it's not one failure. I'm not putting the whole collapse of education on one or two or three items, and
Yes.
it's not on one person's shoulders. It's a collective problem. Now
Yeah.
it's heavily weighted towards certain issues, but everybody has a part in it. They
Yeah.
just do. Um, I just wish we could get back to a common sense discussion about it. It seems like every time I will read stuff on Twitter or other places from afar, it just turns into a battle.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and I just think that when it comes like the voucher, the school choice thing is a good example. To me, it's just common sense that we should give parents the choice. If the choice that they're being forced to go to is not up to par, I just can't see an argument for telling them they can't move their child.
100%.
Okay, but that's a huge argument. It's literally in the news every week
Mm-hmm.
with people arguing for or against. And there's people even, I was just reading somebody did an op-ed from the Texas Teachers Union about how it hurt the choice is un-American. And I was like, I got to read this. I got to figure out how that's possible. And it didn't make any sense to me. And I'm not going to point out who wrote it because I don't want to be that person, but it
Yeah.
just didn't make any sense. But essentially, the crux of the argument was that the school system is very American and that we should support the school system. I think most people do support the school system. They just want it to be better.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. If you had
So
to take,
Bryan,
go
oh
ahead.
sorry,
No.
Go
Stacey.
ahead, Lisa.
So Bryan, where would I find your book? Because I'm from Canada and I would love to get like a full overview of what it's like in the American school system.
So it's on all the majors. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon, of course. It's on Apple iBooks, Google. It should be on all of them as ebooks. You can get the print book if you'd like on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
And what's it called again?
The Real Problems Destroying Education.
The real problems destroying education. Perfect.
Yes. There's a
Yeah.
Amazing.
subtext to it. The subtext is that we're all to blame.
It's true
That's
though.
fair, I guess. It's true.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. I wanted that subtext to kind of be, lighthearted. Like I don't want somebody to look at it and go, "Oh, they're going to be talking about me,
Yeah.
or they're going to be talking about the teachers or whatever." I wanted them to the title to simply say that we're all going to be taking a blow here in this book.
Yeah,
So
definitely. In order for change to come, everybody has to play a little part in it too.
yeah, and we also have to
Yes.
agree on what the problems are, and I think that is the one thing I wanted the book to point out is that people can't even agree.
Yeah, sadly.
You can't agree on how to fix it if you don't even know what we're trying to fix.
Exactly.
So one of the things I point out in my suggestions, I think that every district, every county should have a board just like a corporation would, that of teachers from every single school in that county should be on a board, and they should critically look over all the decisions of the district, what they're purchasing, the curriculum. They should
Mm-hmm.
be able to say, we don't want that curriculum, we want this one.
Yep,
And in a corporation, the CEO cannot just do whatever he wants. If the board
exactly.
says votes it down, he can't. And by doing this, you're giving the teachers a voice. Right now, I don't feel like they have a voice. And they also, one of the most common critiques from teachers is they don't feel like the district administrators have their back. They
Yeah,
don't feel like they're looking out for them. They feel like they're looking out for themselves. And that's a problem. When you work for somebody who you don't think is on your side, that doesn't make for a great work environment.
it's true. It's so true. Now, if you tell everybody about the services that you provide.
So I don't really offer any services right now. The old company Skubes has been sold.
Okay.
Um, but the videos that we created they're on YouTube right now. You can get them for free. It's at skubesed.com, SKUBESED. And there's 1,500 videos in there, all done by real teachers. Um,
Wow.
and I had the teacher in the video. That was the unique thing because other people have done educational videos.
Yeah.
Um, but what we did is we had the teacher do the lesson. I used my broadcast experience. We did them sort of live. And
Mm-hmm.
then those videos, when I was done with editing the beginning and end on them,
Yeah.
those would go out to another group of teachers. And those teachers would vet that video and say, yes, everything in there is good and
Yeah.
everything is at grade level. One of the things I learned, I'll tell you a funny story. So I was talking to a company that did animation,
Mm-hmm.
very expensive, beautiful animation, 3D. Um, and they were doing medical animation for most of the medical schools in the country. But I wanted to see, like, let's do 5 videos for science, for like
Yeah.
elementary science. I wanted to see
Right.
what we could do. And I remember, so they had my wife go and watch the video on how the Earth rotates in 24 hours in a day. You see the light split the Earth,
Yeah.
and it looked beautiful. And they said, "Well, what do you think?" And she said, "That's nice, but that's not going to work." And they were like, "Why?" She said, "Because you don't show the sun." She said, "Second and third graders they don't understand what makes the light. You have to show the sun.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to show." And that was the first time I think I really truly understood that um, you really need to know how to teach to the age group. So one of the first things we didn't do was I didn't go to a high school teacher and say, "Can you teach me a fourth grade math lesson?" Because they had no experience with that age.
Yeah.
They would get it right, but would they talk in a way that a fourth grade would understand? And
Exactly.
so we let all the videos go to another group of teachers who would vet them. And then once they were vetted, they would go live online.
I love that. I love
Nice.
that.
And some of them are long, some of them are very short. It's funny, originally people were like, well, people have short attention spans. These need to be under 5 minutes. And I said, you can't do a calculus lesson in 5 minutes. You just
Mhm.
can't. And you can't really even do a trig. And some of the algebra is longer than five. But here's the funny thing. We used to manage because the videos used to go through YouTube, but they would go through our website. And so we had analytics. The long videos actually did better than the short videos. And I think that the reason is that the because I had a lot of lessons where we had two teachers teach the same lesson their way.
Right.
The long lesson was a little slower. It wasn't as rushed. And if you're trying to learn math, you don't want somebody clicking through it where you have to keep pausing it.
Yeah.
Like Mr. Allen, who was one of my teachers, who's from California,
Hmm.
he uh, he was a little slower talking, and I think that initially made some people nervous, but his videos were very popular, and I
Yeah.
think it's because he was very deliberate
Hmm.
and not rushed.
Right.
Um, but anyway, those videos are on YouTube at Skubes Ed or Skubes Ed, and people can watch them for free.
That's wonderful. Now, if you had to take today's conversation and you want to emphasize on important factors that you think would benefit the listeners today, what are some of those important factors that you'd like to emphasize on?
Well, I would always, I one of the things I want parents to do is to get more involved in your child's education. I'm not saying you have to be at the school all the time or whatnot, but it's really when you talk to teachers, I'm kind of shocked at how many that will say that parents don't come to conferences, they're not looking at their homework. At the end of the year, they'll be shocked that their child's not doing better because they haven't even looked at anything all year. Get involved in your child's education. Don't wait till the end. And also, because along the way, you should be seeing where they're going off the rails or not, and you
Yeah,
need to be helping to correct that.
100%.
Okay. Don't wait until May to get them help with math.
Yeah,
Do it in September or do it in October.
right.
Um, I think too many parents just sort of they think, well, the school's got it. They've got it. And it's a participation thing. You have
Yeah,
to help them as well. The teachers only have so much time. And one of the things about school nowadays that's different from when I was in school and probably you, um, is my wife always tells this is that she has to move on. They have so much, they're trying to teach too
yeah,
much. That's another issue in a year, but they have to move on. So review is very little.
yeah.
And if a child falls behind, it gets very difficult to help get them caught up because she has to get on to the next
Yes,
stuff if she's going to get it all done before the end of the school year.
exactly.
So I would say the biggest thing for parents is just stay involved, just keep your eye on what's going on, and also keep an eye on their behavior and keep an eye on their how they're doing. And I was talking to a parent once in Savannah at a conference, and she said my child was being relentlessly she was a girl and she was being relentlessly bullied on social media, which unfortunately happens more than it should.
Yeah,
But
Mhm.
she said we didn't know it for like 2 years. And I was listening to her and being respectful, but I wanted to say, why did it take 2 years for you to find that out? You don't talk to your kids, you don't sit down to dinner. That's another thing I think that everybody should sit down to dinner with their kids. I know not everyone does. We make them put their phone away.
good.
We're going to have a conversation. It's only going to be 15 minutes at the speed they eat, but at least it's 15 minutes. Okay, but how are you not knowing that your child's being bullied for two
Yeah.
full years?
Right.
And I think I don't want to criticize her in front of her, but that was what was in my head. I just think that maybe you weren't paying close attention,
Hmm.
you know?
Right.
So that would be my thing. I think parents need to stay more involved.
I
Don't
like
be an
that.
absentee parent.
Now, where can people find you?
I have a website that is bryanthomaswetzel.com. It's Bryan Thomas, Thomas, Wetzel, Wetzel.com. It was originally put up by someone else who wanted to show off some of my stuff from media before, but it's been adapted somewhat for the books and I have your
Mhm.
links on there as well. And that's probably the best way to find me because I have all the other social media stuff on there also.
That's awesome. This has been amazing. I am so glad you came on the show today, Bryan. I'm looking forward to our next podcast together. We could talk
Hmm.
forever because there's so many
We
aspects,
could. It's
educational
a there's a
that
deep
we could cover.
subject.
Yeah, so this is definitely something that parents have to really sit down and think about, and really think about what kind of education is their child getting? Are they getting the right
Mhm.
education? Are they paying
Mhm.
enough attention? Because I'll tell you, from my children, I have two that are in their master's program, one finishing up college. Those years go by so quick. And, I
Yes, they
remember when I
do.
first had my kids and, my grandmother came over to me and she goes, enjoy it because it goes by fast. And I rolled my eyes at her
Hmm.
like, yeah, okay. And before I knew it, they were young grown-ups. And so
Yeah,
while you have them when they're young, mold them into the best possible person you can mold
yeah.
and
I
just
have a son turning 28 in March, and I was talking to him about it in December, and I was like, 20,
yeah.
you're going to be 28. I cannot believe that.
I keep telling everybody I'm on my oldest kid's age. He's like, Mom, you can't do that anymore. It's not going to work. But
Yeah,
I really enjoyed you coming on the show today. I'm looking forward to our next conversation, and
I am
I'm really
too.
glad that you bring all these topics up because it's not talked about enough. And I think, the teachers, they're not giving the teachers enough of support, and we lack a lot of support. And the
Mhm.
teachers are getting frustrated, and the teachers are not being able to have the freedom to teach the way they need to teach. And we
No,
really have to come to, they had something I'm not going to get political, but they had something today where, they were trying to make it, tell the teachers how they can approach a person by pronoun or by, Mr.,
right.
and
Mm.
this shouldn't even be an issue. They're in schools to
Mhm.
learn it, let's focus on what's important, and let's get all the garbage out and let's focus on what they're there for. They're there to get an education and to further themselves so they can become young adults and have the
Yes, and be
tools they need
productive.
and be productive.
Yes.
And that's what school is about. And everything else, let's put that to the side and let their parents deal with it. And
I agree wholeheartedly.
so, I really look forward to our next conversation and
I do
thank you so
too.
much. I really appreciate, you being such an advocate and fighting for the school system and for the teachers and bringing awareness to everything. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on again, and I do look forward to it also.
Yes,
I do
me
look forward
too.
to it.
Thanks for letting me hang out, and I'm really excited to read your book.
Yeah.
Oh, great. When we talk next, you can give me any notes you have.
I would love to.
Well, you have a great day, Bryan. Thank you
All
so
right. Y'all
much.
have a good one.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Bye bye.